Number 51.
The drama of the FA Cup.
Number 51, Solihull Moors or Blackpool.
And what could be more exciting
Number 2.
than the third round draw?
And they get Arsenal.
As football fans, we love to see the small teams pitted against the so-called big boys in the hope that the underdog might triumph over adversity.
But again, oh, what a goal! What a goal! Ragford the scorer.
Darwin FC can claim to be the first original underdogs.
The crowd are invading the pitch.
130 years ago, the men from the cotton mills faced English football's elite, the Old Etonians, taking them to 2 replays before bowing out in a blaze of publicity.
Why did I not know this before?
They got erased from history in a sense.
Why did I not even know as a football fan, really, that this started as a sport for upper-class public school boys?
But unearthing their story now, it feels the right time to bring it back to the forefront, particularly with social unrest in the UK as it is today.
Tinged with a sense of injustice, Darwin's victory was a moral one for the downtrodden working classes of Victorian England, Northern England.
They changed England and they changed football.
They should be considered to be the first giant killers.
Now their long-forgotten adventures are being brought back to life through the power of theatre.
We're gonna win the cup.
Phil Cunliffe, BBC Radio Lancashire.
On an autumnal Friday night in Darwin, dozens of people are gathering at the Library Theatre to see a play that's been earning rave reviews. Recently performed at the Edinburgh Fringe, The Giant Killers is based around Darwin's epic FA Cup run of 1879 when the club reached the quarter-finals. The cast of just 4 actors have been touring the production, but this is the first time that they've performed in Darwin, to the people of Darwin. 2 of the actors wrote the play together. They're married couple Andrew and Eve Pearson-Wright. Both come from down south, so why did they choose to write such a visceral, gritty northern tale about Darwin FC?
It was a sort of a domino effect. So first of all, I was writing something about the FA Cup and had history books and were looking through those, trying to find a story that had some truth to it but had real drama that people... It wasn't obvious, and originally stumbled across the story of Blackburn Rovers and the idea of being the first working class team to win the FA Cup and playing against the Old Etonians, and that seemed like a great story in itself. But actually, once we sort of peeled the first layer of the onion, I realised there was a much more interesting story underneath that, which was the 2 or 3 years before that, leading up to that, and in particular Darwin and Darwin Football Club. So then we started researching, we met with an FA historian, read everything we could find online, and then not long after that a book came out written by a chap called Keith Dewhurst who had some lovely information. Then we took a little bit of dramatic licence and stirred it around a bit, and that kind of became the story that we're telling now.
So Eve, at what point did you realise we could actually make a play out of this? We could perform this story, couldn't we?
Well, actually, we wrote it as a screenplay, first of all, because we always saw it being, an epic film, essentially, something that would really move people. We're very little in scale at the moment, and so getting people to read a screenplay from an unknown writing duo is impossible. So we thought, let's turn it into a play. And then we took it to Edinburgh Fringe, and we just hoped that people would like it, and they seem to have really taken to it, so we're so happy with the response.
Darwin! Darwin! Darwin!
The Italians are timing, you can see it!
I get it! I see love! He's free!
What's the pass? He's through!
Go on, Jimmy!
Are you into football? Do you need to be into football to get this story?
Absolutely not. That was my prerequisite for writing a football story, because Andrew's a football nut, but I'm not. And for it to be a story that I could get behind, it had to have way more about it. And so there's a lot of social injustice, there is, a lot of heart of these characters' lives, what it was like to be a penniless mill worker, a second-class citizen. It's almost like a Titanic tale of 2 worlds colliding, and it just so happens to be on the football pitch and the fallout from there, really.
The FA Cup was established in 1871 by the Football Association. It was based on the various knockout competitions between houses at major public schools such as Harrow and Eton and the universities. Football back then was a gentleman's game. played by the wealthy and the well-educated who jealously guarded its ideals and rules. They regarded the likes of Darwin, with their raggedy cut-down trousers, as uncouth.
Have you seen this?
On the day of the match, the Times newspaper dedicated nearly half a page to talking about the differences between the two teams.
It says here that when they played at Eton, there was no such thing as free kicks. Because if someone committed a foul, it was presumed to be an accident, because no gentleman would intentionally cheat.
We used to play that if anyone committed a foul, they were dragged into the middle of the pitch and everyone would give them a punch on time.
My name's Kyle Rowe and I'm playing Billy Walsh and Fergus Souter.
Playing two parts?
Yeah, well, yeah, briefly, the second part briefly in there, but yeah, mainly Billy Walsh, who's the captain of the team.
I'm Nicholas Shaw, I'm playing James Ashton and Jimmy Love and Lord Arthur Kinnaird.
Gosh, so you got three parts?
I know. It's a challenge, but I'm hopefully rising to it.
Is it fair to say that one of these parts is one of the posh boys and another is a working class type?
Exactly, yeah. Well, weirdly, they're kind of similar in a way. James Ashton is the mill owner, who is then sort of the manager, I say, or chairman, essentially, of the team. But then Lord Arthur Kinnaird is kind of the sort of pinnacle of football at the time. He was the captain of the Old Etonians and very much the best player of the period.
Darwin were the first club from Northern England to achieve any success in the FA Cup. And it's no coincidence that their rise to prominence followed the signings of Fergie Souter and fellow Scotsman Jimmy Love from Partick FC. This was controversial, however, because English clubs weren't supposed to pay wages. The first FA Cup final between Wanderers and Royal Engineers was contested by 22 amateur players. And according to Peter Home from the National Football Museum, the Football Association feared that professionalism would ruin the game as they knew it.
They were provided with jobs. The professionalism wasn't allowed at the time, but they were given jobs to do in the area, either in the mill or some other occupation. But they were obviously paid to play football as well.
It's widely believed that this is the first involvement of professional players in English football, yet a lot of people didn't like it, did they?
The FA was a southern-based organisation, but they believed football should be played, a pastime rather than a profession. So there were many on the FA board didn't want professionalism at all, and they clamped down on it. Eventually, it was they gave in and they allowed professionalism in 1885, but before that it was illegal. And they obviously ran the FA Cup, so you had to go by the rules of the FA Cup.
It's almost a forgotten story, really, Andrew, isn't it? Why have we not made more of this, do you think, down the years?
I am absolutely stagnant, and that's a question I keep asking myself. Why did I not know this before? Why did I not even know as a football fan, really, that this started as a sport for upper-class public school boys? It's always that thing of that old adage they used to say, well, you know, rugby is a thug's game played by gentlemen, but football is a gentleman's game played by thugs. And I kind of had that in my head, that this was a game for the working classes. Well, actually it wasn't. It wasn't until Darwin came along, and it wasn't until they grabbed it, took hold of it and demanded that it become theirs. And it's when working class people sort of found football as a way out and found a way of joining together communities, and in Darwin's case, an almost broken community coming together behind a team. Yeah, I've no idea why people don't know this story, but I hope this play will change that a bit.
History is always written by the victors, and because Darwin don't win, they got erased from history in a sense, but actually unearthing their story now, it feels the right time to bring it back to the forefront, particularly with social unrest in the UK as it is today, with wealth inequality. It just seems so relevant.
The 3 cup matches between Darwin and Old Etonians form the hub of the play's narrative. But there's also plenty on the third round clash between Darwin and the sophisticated Remnants, a team of gentlemen from leafy Berkshire. Darwin beat them 3-2 after extra time, and the victory is the first recorded giant killing in English football. It also won them the right to face the poshest team of all.
It says, the gentlemen of the Old Etonian team represent everything that's wonderful about England. They are clean, sober, industrious, God-fearing and respectful. They are the role models we point our children to. Where once we look to the battlefields for examples of courage and glory, we are now increasingly turning our attention to the sporting field. And by allowing the Darwin players into this arena, We are making role models of drinkers and gamblers.
So what were they like, the old Etonians? You must have done a little bit of research. What was it like back then in the late 19th century?
Yeah, well, it was very much posh boys, the landed gentry and people of money that went there. It was a closed shop who then went on to be the ruling classes.
And they made their own rules up on the football pitch.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, and what the interesting thing is that it was a sort of collaboration of all different rules from the different schools, because based on whether they were playing inside, outside, whether they favoured rugby, sort of handling, or a more physical game. So, but then it was only just before, really, that they came up with a single set of rules that people would then know as association football.
The rules were very different to what we know today. Early versions of association football didn't even involve nets, and rather than a crossbar, a tape was pitched between two posts 8 feet above the ground. Peter Holmes says the style of football used by teams down south, like the Old Etonians, was different to what became popular in the north.
They played what we call a dribbling game, where basically all the players went down the pitch dribbling the ball, and in a great mass. They didn't pass the ball at all. They didn't play a long ball. But once the northern team started playing, they might have started by playing that technique, but the Scottish had an influence. Scottish players who'd come down to play for these teams had an influence on the way the football was played. They played differently in Scotland, and they had a more passing game. So there's a difference in the way they approached the actual tactics and how it was played.
At half-time, the scoreboard reads, the Old Etonians 5, Darwin 1.
This is embarrassing.
Go on, Darwin.
Go on, Darwin.
We've got to try something different.
We can't beat them playing their way.
He's right. They're bigger than us. Why are we charging them? Let's pass the ball.
Aye, like we used to do over the field, like we did up in Glasgow. Look, they're fast, right? But a pass is faster. Let's spread out. Pass the ball, eh, Billy?
Is it a tale of gallant failure? Because despite magnificent effort to take Old Etonians to replace, they didn't actually win in the end in that particular cup run.
No, they didn't win, but what they did is they changed England and they changed football. They inspired, there's a line in the play, a sea of top hats changed to a sea of flat caps, and they were there to come and support us. And that's exactly what they did. They changed the nation. And they made people feel that they could go toe-to-toe with their betters. Before this point, people were just assuming, if you were born higher up the social spectrum, then you were better than the people down the bottom. But being on a football pitch, everyone is equal. And so therefore it made people question, why are you my better, actually? And maybe you're not.
London's Kennington Oval hosted all 3 matches between Darwin and Old Etonians. The first game is worthy of a film in itself.
8 minutes to go and it's still 5-2.
Somehow, with Darwin on the verge of elimination, the mill workers rallied to level the scores at 5-5.
Please, God, please.
Suddenly, everything slows down. I look up, but all I can see are Etonian shirts. There's no one in there, there's no one free. I look at the referee. He's putting the whistle to his lips. I know that it's over. I know that we've lost. No! I look at the goalkeeper. He's 2, 3, maybe 4 yards off his line. That's not enough. Suddenly, I'm back on the big hill in Darren thinking about my dad. Shoot, Bobby! I pull my leg back and I hit it. It's up in the air. Oh no. It's too high. It's too high. It's coming down. It's coming down. Yeah!
But then the dream turned sour.
We've got it. 5-1 down to 5 all in 15 minutes.
Etonians are on the knees. We're looking at each other.
We're going to go on and win the cup. It starts here. Extra time, 30 minutes left.
There is no extra time. The Etonians are refusing.
What? Come on, let's go. There's always extra time.
They say there's no light.
There's loads of light. They're running scared because they know we've got them beat.
The referee walks away, quickly followed by the Etonians. Heads down, shamed and embarrassed.
Free playing, Darren. We'll beat them in our own backyard.
It's a flaming stitch-up.
It doesn't matter. We've learnt our game now. We can beat them. We will beat them.
Hey, can you imagine them up at Burley Bank? They're going to get the shock of their lives.
Denied extra time, Darwin weren't allowed to play their replay back home because rules didn't allow it.
The later stages from the quarter-finals onward were held at the Oval Cricket Ground in London, so you had to travel there. And so when there was a replay, which is the case for Darwin, unfortunately they weren't allowed to replay in Darwin, which was unfair, but it was the rules of the FA Cup which had to abide by.
Once again, the impoverished players from Darwin were forced to trudge south for the replay.
The game was tight. Size was their advantage, and they used it. They targeted Billy as one to be roughed up. The game ended in a 2-2 draw, but now we had a reputation as a team with stamina. It was for this reason that the Old Etonians refused extra time again. It was 1 o'clock on a sunny afternoon in March. They couldn't use light as an excuse, so they pulled out a rule book. Extra time had to be agreed by both teams, it said, and they didn't agree.
We confronted him, but he didn't budge. I insisted the next game be played in Darren, but that was met with a no too. Those that met the rules called the shots. We had to travel again, and this time we'd be expected to foot the bill.
For those that don't know the story, Andrew, tell us why they were forced to go to London to play a replay, and why is there a sense of injustice about the whole episode?
Well, this is an area where we as writers took slight dramatic licence, but at the time it was considered that the Kennington Oval was a proper sporting ground in the sense that you could charge people admission because it was, the ground was completely surrounded, whereas even a place like Barley Bank in Darwin, one side of it was open so anyone could walk along. So there was a sense of financial control there, but there was also a sense of this is a southern game and it's a gentleman's game and this is where it's born and this is where people will come to watch it. And so if you want to play our game, you have to travel to us. Immediately after Darwin's Cup run, the FA were forced to change the rules because it was considered so unfair. And so the year after our play finishes, the FA introduced the rule which we have till this day, which is if there's a draw, then you switch venue for the replay, which came out of the sort of injustice of these poor mill workers having to get up. On one occasion, they had to make a choice, the workers, about whether they missed a morning's work in order to get the train down in time for kick-off. Now, we might go, oh, that's fine, it's a morning's work, but these are people that are struggling to put food on the table. And I got a sense when researching that, was that deliberate from the FA and the Etonians? Did they want to force these men to make a decision and perhaps pull out? And there were a few sort of dirty tactics like that.
They insisted on the rules were being followed about where the games were played, about replays and what have you. Even though they said, sorry, we can't play in Darwin, we can't play a replay in Darwin, because the rules say this. They were sympathetic to Darwin. In fact, they contributed some money to one of the replays so that Darwin could travel down to cover the costs. So in that respect, I think they were quite sympathetic. But they probably looked down upon the working class and assumed they would beat them. And in fact, eventually in those days, they did beat them. But the times were a-changing, and it's only a few years later in the 1880s when Blackburn Olympic and Blackburn Rovers were winning the cup. And the dominance of the southern amateur teams was gone forever.
By foul means or fair, Darwin lost the second replay by 6-2. The Old Etonians, 3 inches taller and a stone heavier per man than their opponents, had the final say on the pitch, just as they had off it.
What we proved during that period of extra time was that when it came to a test of character, the men from Darwin were no match for us.
Is it thought-provoking?
Definitely, yeah. I think the sense of community and a lot of the things which resonate in the play are evocative to audiences today. You know, people understand that division, and I think in terms of politically, it's still very present. You know, the North gets sort of left behind, really. It's very London-centric. You know, everyone makes the sounds about trying to give, you know, the North a powerhouse or whatever, but realistically, it's still a massive divide. And but even aside from that, I think as Kyle was saying, London audiences still find it very pertinent.
That for me was probably the biggest inspiration. Although Eve says I love football, we wanted to write something that talked about how we feel about the world and what we see in the world around us. And we travel a lot with our little theatre company, and you do go to places where you go, gosh, wow, this is a town that's been forgotten. And even the town I grew up with, you know, it's mostly boarded up shops and things like that. And the interesting thing was, just after we'd finished writing it and before we did Edinburgh, we live, and I play football near Grenfell, and there was a fire walking around the streets the days afterwards, particularly when Theresa May was supposed to come down, the anger of people who were just essentially saying, I've had enough, we won't take this anymore, and they were furious. And those lines that I was hearing coming out of people's mouths were so similar to the lines that we'd written in the play about how the workers felt. And I just thought, wow, it's 135 years later and nothing's changed.
But we are here tonight to appeal to you. We want to send the working lads of our town to take on the sons of nobles and university professors and government inspectors and any other toff that wants to take us on, and we want to show them what we're about. We want to say this is Darren and we're worth just as much as you.
This is one of the poorest areas in the country at the time. And of course, in the 1870s, this country was the world. So these people, they really are the poorest people on the planet. And the idea that they could then go head to head with the wealthiest. And the captain of the Old Etonians, a man called Lord Arthur Kinnaird, his family owned the bank that became Barclays Bank. He basically, in later life, built Wembley Stadium. I mean, you couldn't get a bigger divide between the two sets of players. And in researching it, the sad thing was, you can find Wikipedia pages about the Etonian players. With some of the Darwin players, we couldn't find out their first names. You know, we had big discussions about how to end this piece, about whether we fast forward to a few years later when Blackburn win the Cup, whether we just leave it when they lose and make it a very sad ending. But actually, the idea that then the town did get a chance to play this exhibition match against the Old Etonians and people from this town could stand together, and actually just that idea of unity, that for us felt like a beautiful ending to the play.
On New Year's Eve, 1879, Darren turned out en masse.
The people of the town walked through the snow to Barley Bank to see their team take on the mighty Old Etonians.
Tired of poor working conditions.
Tired of reductions in pay.
Tired of being treated like second-class citizens.
The town stood together.
The town was united.
The town won!
3-1!
We didn't want it to be a cheesy play and, you know, to sort of fudge history and say that they won, because obviously they didn't. But then when we were kind of writing it, before we found out that they played an exhibition match, it felt like that we were leaving the audience on such a downer, and it was like after they'd been through this war, essentially, of emotions, that they didn't get justice. And then when we did find out this nugget of, or this gem of information that they played this match so that you can kind of leave the final note on an uplifting, yeah! You know, it was just heaven to find, wasn't it? We got so excited.
We're gonna win the cup! We're gonna win the cup!
It needs a second verse!
We're gonna win the cup!
Oh. And now you're gonna believe us.
And now you're gonna believe us. And now you're gonna believe us. We're gonna win the cup. We're gonna win the cup. We're gonna win the cup. And now you're gonna believe us. And now you're gonna believe. And now you're gonna believe us.
Even Mr. Ashton got drunk!
We're gonna win the cup!
So what's been the reaction of southern audiences to what is essentially a play about northern working class folk?
They've loved it as a piece, and we've spoke to them afterwards, and they think the story is great, and they think it's beautiful and it's a visceral story, but that might be a different story once the door closes behind the theatre. They might have a different discussion afterwards, but we'll never know.
They've been surprisingly open to it. Lots of laughs, lots of getting on side Darwin. Someone said to me that they heard in the interval one woman who may or may not have been an Etonian, judging by her voice, say to her husband, because just the first half ends with Darwin about to play the Old Etonians, and she leant to him and said, "Who do you want to win?" And he went, "Well, Darwin, of course," which is great. This is a universal story. I think it doesn't matter whether you're southern or northern. It's a story about heart and about feeling like you're an underdog and feeling like the world hasn't given you a fair crack, and suddenly you're just getting one little opportunity to go, hey, I'm as good as you, and actually I am worth a lot and I can do something. And I think everyone can relate to that.
I love Braveheart, and, you know, I shouldn't like it because I'm the English contingent, but I get behind the Scotsman every time, and I think that that's what this play does. It doesn't matter where you're from, you get behind the Darren team.
It's the night of the performance, just under an hour to go before what is going to be essentially a sellout here at the Library Theatre in Darwin. How special will this be tonight? Because it's here, it's about Darwin, and it's in the town.
Oh, so special. Yeah, we've all been really looking forward to it. And we've had such a wonderful welcome from everyone here. We've been to AFC Darwin and had a look around the ground there, you know, and we've got all of that lot coming to watch us. We've got the historical side of the town coming as well. And it's just lovely to be bringing this story to where it all happened, and for us as well, having done so much research and kind of living with these characters, to come to where it all happened is really special.
You know, you can do as much research as you want, you can do as much character study as you want, but until you actually come here and you get a sense of the environment, you get a sense of the community. I mean, as soon as you walk into Darwin, you get that sense of community, you get that sense of belonging. That's beyond any research you can do, really, I think.
Let's just hope they like it then.
Yeah, well, yeah, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
But the cast needn't have had any worries about the public reaction.
Well, when we saw it at the Fringe, we spoke to them afterwards, and I said, my heart has just been ripped out my chest. I said, it's so emotional. I had no idea what the hell it was about. He wanted to go because it's about football, and I went, oh, right, whatever, we'll just go, because we have so many things to see. And I thought, well, we'll better see something he wants. And I went with no expectations. I didn't really want to go. And I feel emotional now, actually. It was just brilliant. It was a fantastic story. And you just think, well, you live in Darwin. Well, I'm not a Darwiner, but I've been here for a long time. How do people not know this story?
I just thought it was excellent. That was it. We went to see it at the Fringe purely because it's from Darwin, not expecting much of it, and I was just
one of 750 plays at the Fringe.
Well, actually, we just put a finger in a page and picked that, and that. And he said, well, that's from Darwin. I don't know how he found it. And he said, we want to go see that.
Yeah.
We went to see that, and I said that it's the best thing I've ever seen, I think, ever.
Brilliant, absolutely outstanding. We're from Darwin Football Club. I've never seen anything like it. It was just amazing. They've done Darwin proud.
The acting was superb, and I've learnt a lot about what I probably didn't know about. The atmosphere was fantastic.
Sense of injustice, perhaps, about the way it went?
Obviously the result wasn't right, but at the end of the day, you live and learn, don't you? But I would certainly watch something like that again. The actors were a credit to their acting company.
Well, the story was fairly loosely based on Darwin Football Club, but it was a great show, fantastic. You heard the clapping and the cheering, and it went really well.
I've looked into Darwin's football story quite a lot, but to bring it out between four of them, for a non-football audience as well, were just superb. It were unbelievable.
2 years after their defeat to Old Etonians, Darwin FC reached the FA Cup semi-finals, a quite magnificent achievement. Sadly, that would be their high point. The club missed out to Blackburn Rovers as founder members of the Football League, although they did take their place in the second division. Yet considering they were the first working-class northern team to do well in the FA Cup, just how deserving are Darwin FC of the tag Giant Killers?
Before them, there weren't any examples. The FA Cup was won by, predictably, one of the better amateur teams of that time. So it's only when Darwin, who were considered to be such a small team from a different part of the country, could manage to equal the Old Etonians, then they were considered, I think, should be considered to be the first Giant Killers.
One day, perhaps, Darwin's adventures might make the big screen. But for now, and with the FA Cup third round just a few days away, might their story inspire the underdogs of 2019?
Well, hopefully we'll get some giant killings. If I were a coach of a team, I would honestly have got them hearing these stories, watching these plays, because it can happen.
And there it is! Sutton United of the GM Vauxhall Conference have put out First Division Coventry City.
And it does happen again and again, and it happens in those games where you think it can't possibly. I won't tune into this one, it's going to be a one-sided match, and suddenly something happens. I love a giant killing, I always have.
Darwin FC, the original FA Cup underdogs, was written, produced and presented by Phil Cunliffe. Now on BBC Radio Lancashire, Graham Liver and Sally Naden take a look back at this year's BBC Children in Need Challenge.